I'm joined by our international affairs editor, Doug Herbert. Doug, now Biden back in Washington after that quick trip to show America's support to Israel after the deadly Hamas attacks on October 7th. What are your main takeaways from that trip?
Well, first of all, you said quick trip, and it was that in every sense. He was on the ground for 8 hours. I believe the plane ride over on Air Force One was 10 hours. So he was on the plane longer than he was on the ground in Tel Aviv. But that said, look, he was there on a very tricky, double-pronged mission. One is to reiterate what is the U.S.'s ironclad support for Israel, to say, Israel, we have your back, and to do so one-on-one in person with Benjamin Netanyahu, not just to do it from the White House remotely. But also, and here's perhaps the trickier part, it was sort of a nudge warning and a gentle one to Israel at one of the most difficult times in its history since its founding in 1948, to basically said, we understand this primal feeling you're feeling right now after the Hamas attacks on October 7th, your country being struck, a raw nerve, your country being attacked by terror. We understand that, but please, Israel, take it from me, do not give in to your overpowering anger, your overwhelming grief, and let yourself, in the name of that anger and grief and desire for vengeance, go too far. And this is what he said, and he drew a line directly to a recent tragic episode in U.S. history.
Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes.
Made mistakes, putting it mildly, right? Made mistakes. The U.S. after 9/11, we know the rest is literally history, got sucked into two wars, both in Iraq and Afghanistan, which ended up lasting 2 decades, from which the U.S. only extricated itself at great cost in human lives, in suffering, and so on and so forth. Drew a lot of lessons from the fact that it went into Iraq after and Afghanistan after 9/11 without a plan. They went in purely driven by a sense of righteousness, rage, vengeance, and they never knew what was going to come next. And that's what he's cautioning Israel about right now. And the other part of this that was very difficult is the visit obviously came, Jeannie, right after that horrific attack on the Ali Arab Hospital in Gaza, in which now Gazan authorities saying more than 470 people died. Now, it has not been determined who is behind the attack, but Biden said that his own national security estimate, intelligence, and Pentagon have provided a lot of images by way of satellite imagery, open source video. The Israelis have played video tapes that they say are purportedly Hamas operatives talking to each other about Palestinians actually misfiring this missile, firing this missile. So he was basically saying our intelligence suggests that it was the other side, as he put it, the other team that fired the missile, meaning that this was not an Israeli missile, as the Israeli military has been contending. That is an argument. Whether or not it ends up being borne out by the evidence, and whether or not it is borne out that in fact it was a misfired Palestinian missile and not the Israeli Defense Forces firing that missile. I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but in terms of the dynamic and almost the emotional train wreck that everyone's heading for, that message will not be heard across much of the region, especially much of the Arab world, where we have seen absolutely furious, enraged protests at this, from Egypt to Baghdad, and so on and so forth. So it's a message right now. You can give a message based on facts at a time where people are not in a state of mind where they want to hear the facts. So it's probably falling on deaf ears, that message. What people are going to come away with from this visit, especially in the Arab world where we've been seeing those very angry protests in support of the Palestinian cause, it's the embrace on the tarmac at the airport between Biden and Netanyahu.
Doug, later today, Joe Biden is going to be speaking from the White House to the American people just off the back of this visit. What's his message going to be?
He's going to be making a plea basically for two major conflicts right now, both Russia's war against Ukraine and right now the war that Israel seems poised to wage on the ground in Gaza. And he's going to perhaps be making a plea, and I say perhaps because we don't know until he actually says it, but from the White House in this nationwide address for an emergency assistance package that he wants to take to Congress, tying aid, perhaps $100 billion in aid, to Ukraine and Israel for both of them in their wars right now, their separate wars. And the reason he wants to tie them together is, as we know, the Republican House, which right now is leaderless and rudderless and it can't really do anything, before it became leaderless, had rejected any aid to Ukraine as part of its deal in keeping the government from shutting down. The calculation in the Biden administration is that if there's very clear bipartisan, that means both parties' support for helping Israel, even if in the House the Republicans are not ready to help Ukraine. By tying them together, he's basically challenging the House, not the Senate, the lower house of Congress, the House of Representatives, to vote down Israeli aid because of their resistance to Ukrainian aid. He's betting that by tying it together, he'll get the package he wants. And even some Republican senators are calling on House Republicans, calling their bluff as well, saying, I don't think that they would have the gall or the chutzpah, if you will, to vote down this package because they oppose Ukraine aid.